Yeah, I fucking suck. I forgot that registered. So he three bet. I just called. Um. So again, I could have. You know, I called this three bet. Uh, in position. I don't just see why I should ever. Um. He bets half pot. You just call. No. Does he even call if we jam? This guy's, I don't know. I'm not gonna actually tell you what this guy's playing like, but what happened there? I had a very good hand, called a three bet. I was behind. I flopped an ace. We checked. I check. Uh, turn. I think I bet. He calls, and then he bets big on the half pot on the turn. So I've got a decent amount of value. What didn't happen, which would not be conducive in the long run, is I didn't like three bet pot, bet line didn't happen. Okay, that's the main thing. Uh, chose to uh, I don't know who was in position. I was in position. Chose to just show down in position. It's put like position. It's very important because it's actually very important in poker to um, get your showdown at the rate that you choose, at the price that you choose. But anyways, what I was talking about, there's the descriptive game theorists who will say, even if they don't learn from a solver, if they have some kind of strategy uh, and they have a solution, right? Whether it's a solution concept based on Nash, so or not, they have a solution, right? That's what they're exercising. Yeah, so he's been doing this like 70, 100 big blind jams a lot. They think that that needs to be put into effect and the game needs to move towards that solution, whether it's Nash or whatever, in that hand. Okay, that's all they care about. It's in that hand that needs to happen. So it's active. Um, Now, what they also realize is when it comes to GTO, the Nash solutions are generally non-dominant strategies are the answer. As in, like, there's a little bit of loss minimization, minimax. You know what John Van Neumann. So loss minimization. Um, by the way, they game theory has existed since Cortez. Um, you know, and they also, when they talk about rationality, they think about emotion. Like the person is not rational enough to make emotional decision. Like he'll make emotional decision, stress, stuff like that. So like that plays into this again. When the prisoner's dilemma, the PD, which is a, again, what is a strategic form of game theory? It's where you have non-repetitive, so nothing repeats. It's not a finite game. It's not, yes, one guy's loss is the other guy's gain, but it's not repeating, uh, and it's not sequential. So you can, and then like it's not like people are taking turns. So what you can do is you can solve the PD, the prisoner's dilemma, using a matrix. Usually you do see a matrix, right? Okay, this is P1, P2. This is like option one, option, whatever way you can construct this matrix, and there'll be like this is wrong. There should be a third column. And what happens is game theory. Even if you actually look at this answer for this prisoner's dilemma, it actually exists as a compromise. So it's not the dominant strategy. It's not the max EV strategy. because it looks at the long run. Now, in poker, where there's a sequence of events, one person always goes before the other, and if this was also repeated and one person did go before the other and the other person knew that this happened, this would also become an extensive form. We wouldn't be able to solve it through this. You'd need what in like we use in poker, a game tree, right? So this is your root. This is like from the root you can have this node, then branch to this node. There could be like two branches going this way or this way depending on decision making. There's many types of trees, and if you actually do inductive reasoning, which something you know, explorative poker players should know about. So say like 2, 3, 4. Like say we're in this part of the game tree, like you can't go back to this part, right? A pretty easy call. So what's the problem with that? Let's just check. The problem with that is, let's check. Is that means if this is not, if somehow because of having turn-based actions, if a villain does take it towards a different part of the game tree which is not in equilibrium concept, or the solution is with outside of the equilibrium of Nash equilibrium, and I'll define what Nash equilibrium is in terms of poker. Well, then you do need to know that, right? You do need to know what's happening. And in poker, if you look at the fundamental theorem of poker, is if you played in a way that you would have if you could see the opponent's hole cards, you've played well. If you conversely, if the opponent plays in a way where he would have played differently if he knew what you were holding, then you've played perfectly, right? And a lot of people detract because that alludes to game theory, because what is the ultimate way of doing that, and what is the ultimate way of actually maximizing each other's EV or your EV? But in a way we're cheating here because the other person will also have his EV maximized, which is if you could just see the cards. Now think of two really good players who are so good at hand reading and adjusting when they read their hands, their opponent's hand, that they're able to this is basically a fold we can open though. Like most people are stuck at this and stuck even more at this. Not only can they not read someone's hand, and I mean your exploits are based on how well you can, not how well you can read a hand, how well can you adjust. It's very hard to bluff on this board, so I think we should just call, but I'm gonna raise. So this is more exploitative. It's not the fact that I'm like scared, like there's well, why should I be scared? There could be an 8-2, right? It's that it's hard to bluff on these boards, and I think I should just call. Made a mistake there. Yeah, so in poker, let's check. It's easy call, easy bet. Easy fold. Right, so and also when you treat emotions, you should treat them technically, which means that if you took statistical mechanics, you reach an equilibrium in a system after some while, which would be something like data, right? To realize where the data is coming from, and in poker, it's much better to collect data not from the HUD but from modeling. Good modeling of a system of a system is a crucial part of is crucial for rational forensic sort of reasoning. It's essential. It's just really important to do this, like good modeling. So like when you have a model at hand that is able to give you a better idea than your other way of collecting biased data, which there's so much here, there's not even enough. There's one player I have a lot of hands on, yet I know certain things because of how the game is structured. Now you don't have to randomize your so mixing a strategy is basically randomizing it. We don't have to randomize it to like an arbitrary kind of point because of the constraints of the deck, right? So there's a deck which is considered as a passive environmental sort of like thing that you have to deal with. There's rules to the game. All of those constraints are what you use in game because you don't have perfect recall. So GTO, when you study GTO, it's the tool for analysis. So when I see it, I see certain spots. What I see is, man, okay, 20 big blind is open. He c-bet on 5-8-3, and we check raise with 6-7. He's supposed to jam with Jack 10 offsuit. Is he going to? Never, ever. But he's supposed to. He's supposed to call with almost every suited king. If in this rainbow, if one of those suits are there, every suited ace. He's not going that deep. I know that, like, so I know that about the average opponent, and that's much better. And finally, like my coach BBZ once told me, I like it, I love it. He said, what would happen if I never folded and we're not even talking about the second nuts, we're talking about like trip aces, in where like the river there was the third heart. Never folded the second nuts. So this was not even the second nuts, by the way. So if I never folded the second nuts, I can look up my data whenever I have like practically like close to the nuts, like, you know, sometimes the second nuts are the nuts. There are certain lines that the villains might not have had given the way. Again, that all depends on experience. Certain called pervasive actions that opponents undertake, all of that it goes into the you know, thinking about where your combo lies within the hand that you end up making in your range, whatever. But if I never folded the second nuts, what would they be? Right? If I never fold, because what would you never fold? The nuts, right? So if I never fold the second nuts, why not just call them nuts? That's a good way to think about and to practice. Can't fold this. I kind of like got lost in the spot here. Wasn't there another person? It was limped, right? Okay, this is pretty great. Although it's just that we block so much of his like nut combos. Queen high ain't gonna win us money. We also have the 6 blocking the straight draw, straight combos. So why did that work? It might not have worked at all. It worked because he can't have. We block the chance of him, like us blocking his straights, his like strong hands is higher when we block the combinations he needs to have them, right? So now what would GTO teach me through some data, say? Now if I had to mix data with GTO, what would that teach me is that, this is what it would teach me, is that actually in these parts, I don't need to bet, say, whatever, 125%, because people seem to be folding and not meeting their MDF, even if I bet 110% on the river, where they need to kind of call like at 100%, they need to call like 33% time. Wait, well, no, 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 look. Ah, don't want to check twice with this hand. Um, so that it's a bit more than 33%. No, heads up. They have to call 50%. Think about it. On the river, if you pot at the river, how often are people calling half the time? Even if they are, like, trust me, they're not. In passive pots, for example, I realized that there are spots where, like my out of position win rate is close to 100 big blinds over 100 hands. Because they don't happen that often, so obviously this kind of reflects their low sample size. And in position win rate is close to 150, it should be 200. Why? Because when someone's not taking any kind of oh man, sorry, this is my time. Someone's not taking any kind of like initiative in the pot, that means just take it down, man. When you don't have anything. And now this is why I meant, like, so the optimization is coming from the fact that versus an equilibrium and good opponent, first of all, I shouldn't even be able to raise my hands because uh, raise first ends are generally pretty weak. So, and a good exploited player should just never let me raise from any position. Should just 3-bet me every time, or just call me down a ton of times. Is this the same guy? Oh man, I missed that all-in button. Could have 2-pair. He's with a big blind. He's got a wide range. It's PKO. Could have that too, right? Anyways, what we're talking about? Like, he doesn't need to do that. Like, what the fuck is gonna call him? Like, he beats, and he's gonna fold out everything that beats him. So that's different from having ace-9, which does get because there's a 9. Someone could have the turn could be a jack. No, then he doesn't have top pair. So now there in that situation, multi-way, although he would probably not have ace-9 there. If he did somehow, that's top pair, and like now there's 3 left. Like that would be a pretty good spot to like raise and get someone off some equity. He should just like fold with that like stuff going on, or just call maybe. I don't know. So yeah, that's the thing, and the thing with the descriptive game theorists. Yeah, again, doesn't matter whether they look at the Parasol solution or not. The same solution is in Parasolver, is that they will just not see the whole picture. They will have some skew. There's only that much you can exploit someone, and in the end, what happens is this is pretty dangerous looking jam. Ooh, hold in style. Versus a philosophical game theorist who takes the term rationality more technically. A rational player is a more technical term. So, like I said in statistical mechanics, what happens? Its system stabilizes over time, but that data is not he doesn't do that much. So that data is not really taken from this kind of like active data. We don't actively try to like pull off exploits. We learn passively in the lab, and then we pull tendency that are more averaged out. You're never gonna play the same player enough unless you're playing heads up no limit or something, and bum hunting, or like there's only like not much traffic to ever actually be needing exploits, right? This concept that most, even in the prisoner's dilemma, the solution is a compromise, that in GTO solutions are somewhat compromise. That's why people say it's, you know, not max EV. Well, here's the thing: we don't play one hand. When people talk about this like psychological effect of rational agents, well, first of all, they're taking from economics, right? Most of this game is going to lie in, this is a PKO, some different dynamics, but most of this game is going to lie in a typical area of the game, which is an entity which is not in the final table, not close to the final table. So where everyone has a different, like, ICM adjusted strategies are not the same as the chip EV game GTO sort of analysis. And then from this is where we do want to play for max EV. We want to win the most, but in the long run, right? So I don't want to like skew my range where I'm just always, so like a lot of players who are nitty are basically exploitative players. Why? Because they will show up with very strong ranges on the river. They will actually then, what harm does that make? What harm does that like actually attribute to them? Well, they do not learn how to properly bluff on the river, or nor they do they hardly bluff. In fact, one of my biggest league would be calling bluff catching too often. But that happens because again, I'm not gonna have any excuses. It's not an excuse to say, oh, I play with too many tables, that's why. I'm playing one table here, man. I'm only doing it because to be like kind of active. Again, said it too many times. But anyway, so yeah, this bluff thingy, they can't do it because their ranges are too strong. Why are their ranges too strong? Why are they felting a 60 big blind stack with like top pair? Not even like good kicker, or any top pair, even top kicker. Like, and I'm talking about not like there, I will do this too, but in different sort of like circumstances, when my stack is not that big, in a 100% KO, yeah, for sure, man. I just did the guy rivered. I got rivered both the times. I was 89% going into the river. Happens. Guy just binked trip kings on me, which is, the king has been pretty bad to me. And they just go bad kind of, because they've got overpair, they've got top kicker, or top pair. This is not over 5 hands. And this is hilarious because a lot of times when I'm talking to people, and like they just don't want to fold aces, don't want to fold aces. Sometimes I don't either. You know, try to get better, but like don't think that you're going to be an overnight better. However, the way the habits work is, again, if you make a mistake, and also when they have like something with deuce for offsuit and they somehow defended this hand and they got like the nuts on the flop, they forget about aces. They want the other person to have aces. But in any case, what was I saying? Yeah, so again, if you make a mistake and then and then you change what you did. Now, if you make a mistake and it works out, whether you next time you fold that hand and actually make a correct play, or you still open it again, if you do it based on regret minimization, so basically if you fold, you're gonna be like, no, last time it worked. If you open, yes, because it's last time it worked. That's regret minimization. That's how strategies get set. And so, like for example, this is not a true street three street hand. Although if he jams, I'm gonna call. So it's better to have a good check calling range on the river than it is to like bet with like a mediocre strength hand. He folds a lot if I bet, and finally, most important thing, it doesn't actually work. Every time he calls, he probably has you beaten. Whereas when you check, remember what I said: people bet wider, people call tighter. I don't know what that he should just what was I what was the spot? Queen 5 is just barely an open here. So I was out of position. He's in position. Oh my god. In position again. Like he can just see showdown. And he decides not to. Turn 7s into a bluff. Which would be like if you just see bet too much again, like with like a top pair. As soon as you see bet with a top pair, what you end up doing is bloating the pot, which is not going to be a 3 street bomb. There are many ways to play this hand, get value. Now this will allow you to balance, not for balance sake, but so that you can actually comfortably realize how to bluff, realize which combos are great to bluff in the spot, realize what your range is and how that interacts with the board, where your combo stacks up, how your combo stacks up. And in the end, again, modeling is a very good way of forensic thinking and making decisions based on that, rather than exploitative play, which is just a term mostly just because of the non-dominant answers for GTO's Nash equilibrium solutions. Remember that only people who are playing Nash equilibrium GTO ranges are theoretical top best of the best players who almost know each other's cards. That's how good they are. Their Nash equilibrium is actually an exploitative play, exploitative strategy. And what are we solving for? We're solving for the solution concept at equilibrium, and then looking at various streets and seeing how the general opponent underperforms. Now this is important because why is it important? Because it's a robust, much more robust. Sorry, I just lose track of thinking. It's a more robust method of looking at using your experience, observation. Now you could say like data is also observation. Yeah, it is, but you have to kind of dig deep. And now you're not going to do it for every player, right? You can do population analysis and then add some stuff to. You can do two sims. One is GTO, one is with some like extra ace-x added because people have a lot of ace-x in it. But you don't have to like overly like add things. There is enough representation of enough hands and combos in someone's range anyways. People, it's simplistic. So cutoff versus button, there's a default 79% check from original raiser, which would be cut off in a single raise spot. Now for a new player, no matter how in the weeds they have to get to learn GTO and biosolver, what is essentially doing is it's giving them generalized answers that basically work on the inputs you provided, which is our ranges, and based on these they can get like some rule of thumb answers, and depending on these ranges that you provided and how you've built your sim, you can realize that usually people are underperforming by 10 to 15% in all spots, but seen like in high stakes people are three betting from blinds to the optimal like 15%. Like they're getting better, man. I think I've spoken about it. So generalization, simplification, all come from GTO. Think about playing exploitatively. Man, the amount of stuff that you would have to like. First of all, if I try to like play, I know it can't even be done. It's actually kind of like oxymoron. Like it's a statement. Like it just doesn't make any sense. It's just like playing GTO doesn't make any sense. You study through the model of Nash equilibrium because it's fucking Nobel Prize winning math that very applicable. Yes, it has its shortcomings because it does want its agents to act rationally. However, we are humans and we are considering ourselves somewhat rational. So why wouldn't we be able to look at that and actually think of what the solution concept supposed to be and what is the adjustment we should be making and to exploit or sometimes not exploit. In short stacks, you can't exploit it. At short stacks, it's very hard because why? The game is much more constrained. The actions that people take are a lot less. They can't do much. Ace queen suited is a 10 big blinds under the gun jam. How are you gonna exploit? How are you gonna like not? However, 15 big blinds, ace queen suited is not even a jam. You can totally. It's one of the answers. It's a good thing about Pio. It's so stupid that it gives you every sort of answer, and it's so. But you don't just look at Pio and just be like, okay, I'm gonna do this. In fact, I was told again, when you look at a sim, don't look at your hand and don't look at what you were supposed to do in that situation. Look at everything. Like look at what would have happened if you had this part. What happened if this card came? How was EV? Like you can't change your equity in a part unless a card comes that does change it. Your EV can be changed. One of the things that is really awesome is that again, this is why people like try to play exploitatively, is because the worse your combo is, the more EV you can have by taking an aggressive action with it. But the notion of what an aggressive action is bad, because calling a 3-bet or defending 4s on an 8-6-3 board is aggressive. Although both, because the word call 3-bet out of position, call and not raise is used, it's thought of as being a bit passive, right? At 50 big blinds, for example, I already know, or 40 big blinds, and 25 big blinds, I can guarantee you 7s is a jack. Jack high board, we're gonna just jack. That's a pretty nasty turn. So a lot of people say that we should be firing here when they're not taking interest. The thing is, if they've, sure, on the river they might spike something. If they have a draw or something, they will still continue. Now equities are frozen, right? Should I bluff catch here? Nah, there's just no point. And if there's gay explorative poker players who understand that, okay, small 6 games, you have to be tight, you have to edge pass, you don't have to call the river that often. Oh, one more. Well, then they are taking a leaf out of game theory, but the only problem is optimal play. Only problem is they're not able to optimize their bet sizing and stuff by realizing how much people call and how often they don't. Okay, when we raise, this is fine. We can just 3-bet. We can call even with the 7's not gonna win us over 5 streets, right? It probably will sometimes in this sort of scenario, but it's also not like a 3-street hand. I hear. Ooh la la. Ouch. Oh, okay. I thought he was straight. It's the better kicker. It's okay. We can fold there too. But again, sizing, if you pots it, fold. Alright, I did have a lot more to talk about, but now I'm getting parched.